Marina's childhood. Marina was born in July 20, 1923, nurtured by her Spanish father Julio Ortiz and a Filipina mother, Francesca Veloso. Marina was influenced by the post-Spanish era. She just graduated high school and was 18 years old when the war broke out in December 17, 1941.
What is the Marina story all about?
Marina is a coming-of-age story about a girl trying to survive the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II.
Where was Marina the year when the Japanese invaded the Philippines?
Marina is a young woman living in Ilo-Ilo City circa 1941, when the Japanese invaded the Philippines and bombed the cities.
Can you please describe the situation? Who was with Marina at the time? What was requested of Marina? What was Marina's reaction?
With Japanese fighters and bombers maintaining a presence over the cities, Marina's schoolteacher approaches Marina for a favor: to accompany Sophia to her nephew Moises for shelter. Left homeless and without family, Marina gratefully agrees, so long as Sophia can secure transportation.
How did Sophia handle the situation?
Sophia and the school's Mother Superior negotiate with Japanese officials to gain transport permits to board a Japanese military ship.
How did Marina and Sophia feel about the situation upon boarding the ship? Where was their destination? How were they treated by the Japanese militaries on board?
Aboard the Japanese ship, Marina and Sophia experience constant discomfort of being the only women around, although none of the soldiers make any advances.
What was in Marina's mind when they arrived at the destination in Negros Occidental upon meeting the guerrilla leader Moises Padilla, who is a nephew of Sophia, the schoolteacher?
Eventually they arrive at Negros Occidental. What Marina thought was a retreat free from the presence of the Japanese was instead crawling with Japanese soldiers.
What was the plan of the guerrilla leader? Can you please describe the surroundings?
As it turns out, Moises had formed a cell of guerrillas to resist the Japanese, and Sophia was taking Marina into the dense Kanlon jungle to hide out with them. Marina, who was born and raised in the city, must now adapt to surviving in an inhospitable wilderness, all with the threat of the Japanese looming over them. Moises leads Sophia and Marina through the jungle, teeming with wildlife such as birds, wild boars, and monkeys throwing fruit at passing humans.
Who did they meet on the way? And why did Moises refuse the two Norwegian sailors to join them to fight the Japanese?
En route to the hideout, the trio encounter Mire and Ole, Norwegian sailors shipwrecked by the Japanese. The sailors ask Moise if he is fighting the Japanese, and when Moise confirms, they ask if they can join him. Moise agrees to take the sailors along, but elects to leave him at the hideout with the other non-combatants. The sailors' pale skin, blonde hair, and huge builds make him far too visible in the jungle for stealthy operations. Mire is also somewhat injured and malnourished from attempting to escape the Japanese, so Moise decides to leave him to recuperate in Marina and Sophia's care.
Can you please describe the hideout?
Eventually they arrive at the Guerrilla hideout, a huge sunken hole with giant trees growing out of it, the bottom practically invisible to the surface thanks to the dense foliage. Nearby is a waterfall and river, providing all of the camp's water needs: drinking, cooking, bathing, and fishing. The camp is gifted food by farmers and other sympathetic citizens, but supplements this with hunting, fishing, and foraging.
How did Marina and the Norwegian sailors feel about their hiding place situation?
Marina and Mira gradually bond over shared feelings of grief, loss, and displacement. Haunted by the loss of his country, his ship, and his crew, Mira is a husk of a man struggling to find the will to live. Although they barely contribute to the guerrilla camp's needs at first, they slowly learn survival skills such as sneaking and crafting, with Moises and Sophia as their guides. In time, Marina and Mira come to terms with the reality of their situation and find the resolve to see the end of the war and rebuild their homes.
Can you please describe the city's situation at the time? How did the Japanese control the situation?
Meanwhile, in the cities, the Japanese army exercises increasingly oppressive measures to stamp out local resistance. The Japanese torture suspected guerrillas and sympathizers, often arbitrarily and without evidence. They abduct women and girls to be used as sex slaves, calling them comfort women, to hide the brutality of the practice. They change the curriculum in schools to outlaw the use of English, to establish Japanese as the lingua franca. The Japanese establish strict control over all forms of transportation throughout the country. Perhaps most devastatingly, just as Marina and Mira settle into life in the wilderness, they are suddenly put to a test. After Moises leads a supply raid gone wrong, the Japanese army gains clues to track the guerrillas. While gathering materials away from camp, Marina and Mira carelessly stumble upon a Japanese search party narrowly evading detection.
How did the hiding place drive away the enemy? Please describe the location, and how did they feel about their situation as the city was continuously bombed by the Japanese?
Unarmed and unable to fight back, the two used the various skills and tactics learned from their time in the rough to distract and escape one soldier after another, culminating in a shootout between the guerrillas and the Japanese troops. Though the soldiers are far better armed, the guerrillas' knowledge of the terrain and traps set throughout the jungle allow them to drive off the enemy. Surveying the results of the battle, Marina and Mire realize that their complacence could have led to a much more disastrous outcome. They reaffirm their will to keep living, continue helping the guerrillas, and vow not to put the camp at risk again.
What happened then after days, weeks, months, and years? How did the American army notify the citizen?
Days bleed into weeks, then months, and years. The guerrilla camp grows larger, and more people seek refuge from the war. Marina and Mira finally find themselves at peace and with a newfound sense of community. One day, leaflets rain over the region, warning civilians to flee from certain areas. The American army has returned with reinforcements, promising an end to the war. The Americans also promise safe passage home for Americans and other Allied citizens stranded in the country. With Moises as a liaison, Mire and Ole take up the offer to return to Norway.
And what was their situation after the liberation?
Marina, no longer a naive and helpless little girl, and Mire, no longer consumed by despair, part ways. But not before acknowledging that their time together has saved them both. Sophia returned to school after the war ended, hoping to spread awareness of the atrocities she had learned of during her time with the guerrillas. Today, the reality of the comfort women is a fading memory, blurred by people who wish them buried. Moises Padilla turned to activism and eventually politics. Years after the war, Moises ran for governor of Magayon municipality against an oligarch ruling the area with an iron fist and a private army. The governor punished this display of resistance by having Moises abducted, tortured in the streets, paraded naked in front of the town, and ultimately executed to set an example. The Secretary of Defense, Ramon Magsaysay, called the incident an outrage of the highest order. He brought the oligarch to trial and eventually to justice. After Magsaysay became president of the Republic of the Philippines, Magayon was renamed Moises Padilla to honor his martyrdom for the country. Mire returned to serving Nortraship, sailing the world until at long last he could return to a liberated Norway. He eventually started a family and named a son Ronald, in memory of friends that couldn't pronounce his name. Marina returned to Ilo-Ilo City and helped in its reconstruction, joining the Americans as a translator and liaison. Her work with the Americans opened the doors of the world to her. But despite her travels, she always found herself drawn to home.
On behalf of LeRu Film International, I would like to thank you, Estefano, for participating on the interview about the Marina story, written by Goody Rameau and Kevin General, coordinated by Eileen Carlos.